Hello and welcome to today's Box on Screen. My name is Emma and I'm the Senior Curator at the Box, and I'm here today with Ben. Hi Ben.
Hello everyone, my name's Ben and I am an archival student at the University of Plymouth doing a master's degree, and I'm also involved in the Mayflower project here at the Box as well.
So what are Ben and I doing down here in the basement of the Box, and what is the Box? Well, the Box is Plymouth's newest cultural destination, a museum, gallery and archive. We have collections ranging from local history to archaeology to maritime history, fine and decorative art, and archive collections that cover the whole of our region. There are over 2 million items in our collection. If you haven't visited us yet, I'd really encourage you to come and say hello. Details are on our website. I promise you, you won't be disappointed. Also within our collections, we have a fantastic archive film collection. Over 250,000 reels, tapes and films that, if you played them end to end, would be 10,000 hours of content. So if you had some Gus Honeybun birthday hops, or you were a fan of Westwood TV back in the day, you may see some things that you remember in our clips today. Specifically today, we're looking at the theme of women, power and protest, breaking down boundaries over decades, those milestones, and the steps that led up to them. This is in response to International Women's Day theme of Challenge to Change.
Golf Victor, Golf 38, 10-5, back for Lee, over.
And without further ado, milk deliveries. We're going to be looking at Laura Wilton, who was a milk delivery agent in Torrington. She delivered her husband's milk from his dairy farm for over 50 years. The film you're about to see is her last round in the 1970s. So Ben, in that film, obviously it was a novelty for a woman to be delivering milk perhaps, but it wasn't always, it is now an equally shared role, but it wasn't always that way, and perhaps, you know, historically there are turning points where more women took on these sorts of roles.
Yeah, absolutely. So my research with the Box has been around the suffragettes and the suffrage movement, and what we found was very interesting in that area was during the onset of the Great War, during and afterwards, more women were entering into the workplace doing those traditionally male jobs while the men were going off and fighting on the front line.
And of course, today, I suppose, you know, looking at this through the lens of COVID, lots of people are depending on those kind of community services like delivering your milk. You know, when you can't get out to the shops, it's vital that things come to you, and our kind of milk delivery networks are providing a vital function.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is one of the things that I thought was really interesting about this film specifically, was that sense of community spirit, which I think that we have really rediscovered during the lockdowns and the coronavirus. I think the other thing is those nice little synergies that you get between these historical archives and the present day, where you can really relate with things in different ways. Absolutely.
So now, Ben, we're going to take a look at some pioneering female pilots and engineers in this silent film from the 1930s.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been one of my favourite clips, actually, so really looking forward to discussing this.
Yeah, watch out for the air skittles.
Oh, they're amazing, aren't they?
Yeah, so it seems a bit dangerous by today's standards.
Oh, no, they knew what they were doing.
Yeah, all good fun.
Exactly.
So Ben, there we saw 4 pioneering female aviators, mechanics, businesswomen, including Lady Victor Bruce, who in 1931 was the first woman to fly solo around the world. It occurs to me that these women were ladies in the kind of titled sense before they took up these pursuits, and perhaps their privileged position enabled them to break those boundaries.
I do completely agree with you, and I think that what's really important to highlight with that is that even though these were kind of flights of fancy, if you'll pardon the pun, it did lead the way for a lot more women in that industry in the longer term as well. The other thing that I particularly liked about this film and that I noticed was that they very much maintained their femininity while working on this very masculine role. It was very clear that they were women doing this and they weren't trying to be men, as the media sometimes does portray them to be.
True, true. And I think that's particularly interesting to hold in mind when we now go fast forward to 1977 and the amazing Pam, the first female police officer in Buckfastleigh. And you'll see perhaps in the video that she goes about things in a different way because she's a woman.
Absolutely, and I think that it's the right way as well.
Golf Victor, Golf 38, 10-5, Buckfastleigh, over. I'm the new police lady in Buckfastleigh, so
Yes.
if ever I can be of any assistance to you, you give me a ring and I'll be out on a motorbike to see
Yes.
you. Okay?
Well, it's generally too late. Time I call you, they're gone with it.
Is that right?
Yes.
What do they wear? They pinch things off your phone, do they?
Yes.
Oh my goodness, we'll have to see
When
what
they
we
come
can do, all
when
right?
they come.
That was got... I'll do a similar...
Hello, Pamela.
Hello.
Pamela, what do you feel about taking over the village in this way?
I'm looking forward to it. I enjoy police work and I really want to get more involved with people, and this is one of the jobs in police force that you can get to know the local people in a residence job.
Now, I'm not being rude, but you're rather short. Was it difficult to get into the police force?
Yes, it was. It was quite difficult. I think in the end they let me join because I kept writing so many letters. They got fed up. That's the only thing I can think.
Yeah, I mean, one has to be honest. You are the minimum height, of course, but only just.
Yes. Well, according to Devon and Cornwall, I'm 5'3" and 7/8, which is an eighth of an inch too short. But it was an exception in that case.
Pam, there are going to be times here, obviously, at 10:30 at night when you're going to have to deal with the odd drunk or two. How do you feel about that?
I don't mind at all, really. You can only deal with every situation as it comes. I've just come from Plymouth where, nightly it was a case of drunks everywhere. We managed there, I managed. A lot of the time being a woman can help. The fact that you joke along with them or get them to walk home. In a place like this, instead of arresting them and sending them to court, get their friend to take them home, tell them to go on home, bundle them in the car if I got the car and take them home. Just keep the peace, really.
Now, there are some things that a male constable could do that a female constable isn't going to be able to do. How do you feel about that?
Well, we just have to deal with it as it comes. There are policemen around. When I'm on duty, there will be a man somewhere around. Let's hope if I need help, he'll be able to get here.
Can I ask you what you feel about having a lady police constable?
Well, I think it's high time they did. Now do you know? That's how I feel about it. You see, a lady is more attractive. They don't like the look of the gentleman. You know that, don't you?
Well, I think it's a great idea. I really do.
How do you think she's going to fit into the village?
I think, from what I've seen of her so far, I think she'll fit in very well.
Be all right.
Do you think she's going to be able to handle you all?
Well, we don't want much handling.
So Ben, that was Pam, the amazing first female police officer in Buckfastleigh. What I really took home from that clip is how interviewing styles have changed. I don't know about you, but it seemed to me quite loaded when the interviewer was saying, well, you seem a bit short. And my favourite question, how are you going to handle drunks? And she says, well, I've worked in Plymouth. I mean, it's just, you couldn't make it up, could you?
Absolutely, no. Pam definitely knows what she's all about, and I think that that's one of the interesting things about her, is that she definitely uses her gender to her advantage when dealing with those situations. As she says, I don't just throw them in jail, you know, I try and have a joke with them and make them feel comfortable and get them to get home by themselves, which I think is always a better way for everybody involved, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's interesting to think about how women perhaps bring a kind of different emotional intelligence, a different dynamic into the workplace. And that really only could happen as a result of the 1975 Equal Pay and Gender Discrimination Act, which enabled women like Pam to go into the police force and to qualify as police officers in their own right.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was such a landmark piece of legislation for women in the workplace. And I think it's also important to note that back in 1975, the pay gap between men and women was 40%, which is really, really, really high. And that act did do quite a lot to reduce the gap in the pay. Unfortunately, it is still there, but it's definitely, well, going in the right direction.
Yes, I think it's about 15% now, isn't it?
About 15% at the moment, yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting. We'll come back to this later. I think we're going to look at a film at the end where it's a point to think about progress around pay gaps and kind of the way that women are treated in the workplace. So we'll perhaps come back to that. But right now, time to go to 1990 and see the new sailors on board HMS Brilliant, the first female crew members on the ship.
The Wrens, who are making maritime history boarding one of the last bastions of male society, are fully prepared for the rigours of working at sea. Since April, they've been put through intensive sea safety and firefighting courses. 5 more weeks of operational training lie ahead of them at Portland. But they're still ready to show themselves as willing and as competent as any of their male colleagues.
We'll be doing everything. Same as the lads, we'll be scrubbing out with them, we'll be working with them. You know, that's what we expect. So, no, we're not going to get any favours done for us. Treated as equals, that's what we want.
I've worked in the dockyard for a while, I've been on board for a while, and all the lads are great. They really are.
After sea training at Portland, HMS Brilliant will be available for tasking anywhere in the world. What if their tour of duty takes them to the Gulf?
Well, if it comes along, it comes along. And we're part of the fighting ship we are now. So just be part of my job. I mean, I knew that before I joined anyway. And you join the Navy to be part of a fighting force. So if it comes along, we'll go down there.
Welcoming his new recruits aboard, Captain Richard Cobbold also pointed out that there was to be a no-touching rule on Brilliant.
I think initially there was a little bit of doubt as to whether they'd disrupt the well-known practices that we have on board. But I think now that everybody accepts them and are looking forward to it, I think they'll be welcomed on board just as any other young junior rate joining their first ship is welcomed on board and helped to settle down.
Do you see some problems ahead then?
Quite a few.
Like what?
Watchkeeping, lifting missiles, stores, ammunition ship.
The new ratings on HMS Brilliant are paving the way for a further 200 Wrens who'll be joining Royal Navy ships over the next 3 months.
Yay! So, Ben, in that film we saw the Wrens taking up their positions on HMS Brilliant, and the voiceover states that HMS Brilliant, and the kind of serving on naval ships was, and I quote, one of the last bastions of male society, followed swiftly afterwards by the commander saying that there was some concern that they might disrupt established routines. The women in the video seem pretty cool with it. They know what's expected of them. They're ready to serve in the Gulf if that's required. They don't see any problems. One of the other officers on the ship, male officers, sees trouble ahead. So an interesting moment for women, the history of women at sea and in the forces, perhaps.
Absolutely. And I think that that's a really important thing to note how long women have actually been serving in the UK Armed Forces. It started off in the First World War with the introduction of the WRAF, the Wrens, as we saw there, and also the Queen Mary's Auxiliary Army. And what I felt was really interesting is even though these weren't combat roles, often women were still very much involved in coming under fire. A notable example of this actually from Plymouth was Dr. Mabel Ramsey, one of the first doctors in the Southwest, who was awarded the Mons Star after coming under fire during an Allied retreat, still not leaving her patients' sides while doing that. She actually went on to command her own field hospital in France, which was really incredible.
So thinking about, you know, women breaking boundaries, there's also pushing against those boundaries, right? So now we're going to go to 1983 and to CND protests, both at the dockyard and on the Tamar Bridge. So this is a silent film, but you'll be seeing women obstructing the gateway to the dockyard and also holding hands, powerfully kind of holding hands on Tamar Bridge as the traffic goes racing by. So, Ben, there we saw women protesting in 1983, just a few years before Chernobyl and that awful disaster. And what struck me as a mother myself was the women who had their children on their backs there. And that brings a peculiar kind of gravity, I think, to protests when there are tiny babies partaking of it, you know, and it's about the world that they will inherit. I wonder if you see any parallels or any similarities between those methods of protest in the 1980s and what you've been studying with regard to the women's suffrage movement.
Yeah, absolutely. From my research, there hasn't been a huge amount documented on how children and the sons and daughters of the suffragists were being used in the protests, but that was definitely one of the really key things that they were fighting for, was their future of their children, and to make sure that they grew up in the best society that they possibly could have. I think it's also highlighted in the Mary Poppins song. One of the lines from Mrs. Banks is, "Our daughters' daughters will adore us." And I think that's a really powerful, powerful line and a powerful note for what the suffragettes and the suffragists actually stood for.
What a wonderful thought. So now we're going to go back in time again to 1966. Now, obviously, there was some football stuff going on that year, but what was also going on was an interview with a housewife in Truro. She's a graduate of computer science, and she describes herself as a very logical person, and I love that. And she's undertaken a degree and then has raised a family, got married and raised a family, and has been at home and wants to get back into the workplace. And the interviewer is, again, looking at the difference in interview styles, the interviewer is quite aggressively saying, well, what did you think would happen? You went off and got a degree, but you also had children. And the implication being that it's unfair to expect a woman to be both a mother and to have a career. When I first saw this film as a working mum myself, it made me really happy and really sad at the same time. I think when we watch this, if we hold in mind, people's experiences, women's experiences, it's a good barometer, really, this film, for how far we've come and maybe how far there is yet to go.
Absolutely. I think that the lack of opportunity and experience for those women at that time, and very highly educated women as well, was something that really struck me personally.
When, in fact, you were at university, did you envisage that you would be in this situation where you wouldn't be earning your living but just bringing up two children?
No, I never really thought about the future when I was at university.
But now, how much does the loss of a career mean to you?
I don't want a career, I just want to fulfill the other half of myself, part-time, so that I can have a dual personality.
Do you ever feel, in fact, that your education was a complete waste of money and waste of time?
No, I don't think so, but I am wasting myself now.
In what way?
I have a certain talent for logical thinking, and this talent, which I was born with, is greater than any other talent that I possess. And I'm not using it in any way, and I haven't used it for the past 13 years, and I feel this is a waste.
Is this primarily because you've become immersed in the home and the family and bringing up children?
Partly, I feel that a woman's job is to be with her family in its early years and in the home, but partly because there is a lack of opportunity here for the work for which I was trained. And I would like to achieve a happy balance. I don't wish for either a sole career or sole time with the family. I wish to balance the two.
Does it mean trouble in your home? Does it ever come up in domestic affairs?
Not in the home. It leads to a conflict within myself, which leads to a certain amount of ill health. I'm sure that I should be a healthier and a happier person if I had an outlet for my mathematical ability.
What simple outlet would help you? What to begin with? What would be the first step?
I trained as a computer programmer, and I would like to get back to that job, but I feel that at the moment I need a little retraining. It's 13 years since I was in touch with the computer world, and a lot has happened to it in that time. And I do need some retraining, and I have been trying to get it. I have inquired what correspondence courses there are, and there is absolutely nothing in the correspondence line, and there is nothing, no college to which I could go, really, in the whole of the western half of England.
Would just contact with people, fellow mathematicians, be of any use to you?
If they had an interest in automation, yes, it would be a great help.
Do you feel dead and stultified sometimes because you have to put up with coffee parties, with just playing tennis for something to do perhaps in the morning?
Yes, I do at times. I find discussion with other graduates very stimulating, but this is still not enough. I lack a reason for my life.
And what would give you this reason? And what reason do you want?
I want to do something creative in the mathematical world, especially in computers, because I think that is a coming science, and I would like it to be of some benefit to the community.
Do you feel that perhaps there was something wrong with the educational system in which you were brought up in that didn't make you realize this at the time?
There was, yes. I had a very limited education in a small private boarding school that was very Victorian, and I was educated in mathematics and very little else. It was a very one-sided education. I was also very immature on account of this education, and I did not realize the implications of having to choose between a career and a family at all until the time came.
You would never go to the extent of asking your husband to move out of the area to somewhere where you could retrain as a computer programmer?
No, because he's very happy down here. If he could find an equally happy job elsewhere, I would like him to move. But he has very fixed ideas about staying down here, and as he is happy, I think that is more important than other things.
Does this problem, in fact, apply just to graduates in this area?
No, I think it applies to every woman. There's a great lack of opportunity for women to do part-time work to fit in with their families, and I think there's a need for it at all levels, but I think it does apply slightly more to graduates in that some, particularly the scientists and those trained in research, feel it more because of their independent training.
So Ben, that was, as we said before, an interesting marker perhaps for how far things have come and how far we have to go. What was interesting, I think, was when you look at her lifestyle, and she's driving off to play tennis during the day whilst the children are at school, you know, there's definitely more acceptance now. There's absolutely more acceptance now that women have both careers and families, and that, you know, if one is married and has children, then you don't have to stay at home and look after those children necessarily. However, you know, I have friends, and I know there are many women in the country who are struggling to build a career for lack of affordable childcare and parental support, really. The government introduced shared parental leave back in 2015, and there's still only a 7% take-up. So I think that shows you that there's perhaps some way to go in terms of equality of opportunity for women. And it's interesting to think that this is a female computer programmer right at the dawn of computer science, and she's desperately trying to get back in, having taken a career break. There are more options for women now. There's certainly more that you can get involved with STEM, and there are active campaigns to involve women in science, technology and engineering. I wonder historically, if that's a stigma that's been overcome or whether it's ongoing.
I think it is definitely an ongoing problem, and I do believe that there is an awful lot of misogyny that still does exist, especially in tech giants. I know that Google have reported quite a lot of issues with problems surrounding women in the workplace and how they are treated and how they're felt to be treated. I think that there is definitely a very long way to go in STEM, and I do believe that it is still very much positioned as a male market, something for the boys to do. And I really don't think that that's the right way to think about it, because I know many, many very talented female engineers, female mathematicians who do an absolutely incredible job.
Thank you for joining us today for The Box on Screen. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on social media, and if you really would like to get to know more about The Box, what we do and why we do it, you can become a member. Details are on our website. You can also check out our archive film collection on the BFI Player website too. Thanks for joining us today. Goodbye.
Goodbye.